What? Oh, yes. Yeah, we are. We're good to go.
You ready, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, let's call the village council meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions, deletions, or changes to the proposed agenda for this evening? Being none. Roll call, please.
President Schneider,
Present.
President Pro Tem Dyke, Councilmember Alec, Councilmember Kalka,
Present.
Councilmember Feldman,
Present.
Councilmember Glasser,
Present.
Councilmember Steffler.
So we can go forward. All right. So the first minutes we have to take a look at is for the public hearing of February 7th. This was regarding our proposed zoning ordinance amendment 193.7, deferment of parking requirements. Let's see. Actually did have under agenda for those minutes, the second paragraph that begins with discussion was held. And I believe we need to add a little bit of that language. So the discussion was held on and I think it should be impact singular would be of the stormwater detention calculations. Flow a little bit better. Anybody else on the public hearing minutes of February 7? Regular meeting minutes for February 7. Page 1 of the minutes under number 3. I really didn't want to become a communist, so if you could make it READ instead of red.
Yes, sir.
RED, please. That'd be great. Thanks. Okay, and so one other thing. So the very last paragraph under council manager comment, President Schneider stated, blah, 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 potential purchases of the movie theater, and it should say and medical building. But before that, it should be potential purchaser. Okay. And you want to address that subject matter a little bit later. Anybody else on minutes? General fund. Major streets, local streets, Parks and Recreation Fund, Downtown Development Authority Fund, Sewer Fund, Water Fund, Equipment Fund, Payroll Register Report.
Hold on, back on the equipment fund, sorry.
Which
Under the police and sheriff, my lack of knowledge on this, but does the police department have a 22 GMC Sierra?
No, they do not. That was, yeah.
it's going to be
No,
struck,
that should be under wastewater treatment plant. That should be under the 536.
so it'll be struck from general.
It'll just be moved down to the 536.
Okay.
department.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on? Payroll Register Report. Water Report. Usage is down again.
Question there, is that supposed to be January 21 or January of 22? Okay.
Wastewater Treatment Plant Monthly Report. Excuse me. Strike that. DPW Monthly Report. Sorry.
Standing report.
And next comes the wastewater treatment plant report. Next, we have the police report. Next, we have building permit report, AKA Construction Code Authority. Financial position report. Clerk Treasurer's report. Thank you again, Kim, for continuing to do that. It's very helpful. And lastly, DDA Executive Director's report. Entertain a motion. Was it you, Tim? Yeah. Motion made by President Pro Tem Dyke, supported by Councilmember Glasser, to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimously approved by council members in attendance. Now is the time on our agenda for public comment relating to any of our regular agenda items for tonight. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Regular agenda, RRC Joint Annual Meeting, Redevelopment Ready Community, and our allegiance with MEDC. Caitlin? Hi. Hi.
I did it. All right.
Yep.
See if we can. There you go. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Caitlin Haven. For those who do not recognize me, I'm the planning consultant with Rowe Professional Services Company. And so once a year, as part of the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, one of the best practices that we're currently exercising is that they require us to have a joint meeting. And so part of it is we're going to do some training for tonight. We'll be talking about some best practices, different introductions. So then all of the representatives here are a little bit more aware of each other. And then we'll be talking about the master plan specifically and what that document is. And then we are in the process of looking at updating that master plan. So for introductions, I didn't know if we wanted to just quickly kind of go around the room and just say who you are, what board you're part of, just so then everyone can have a face to a name if not everyone's aware of who each other are.
Okay. You want to introduce yourself to Brian? Why not?
Brian, I'm the DPW supervisor.
Kim Kiesler.
And he's a
Clerk
treat, and he's a treat.
Treasurer.
I'm sorry, Kim.
Kim Kiesler, Clerk Treasurer.
Wayne?
Wayne Glanzer, Village Council.
Pete Feldman, Village Council.
Steve Schneider, Village President, also member of DDA Board and Planning Commission.
Jackie Kalka, I'm on the Village Council and the Elma Parks Board and Rec.
Trent, Village Manager.
Glenn Mink, Planning Commission.
Gary Center, Planning Commission.
Ernie Falk, Planning Commission and Chairman of the Group.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So getting into our training, if you ever have a question, feel free to just raise your hand. I'm willing to kind of stop and answer those questions as those pop up throughout the presentation. So first part, some of the important documents to be aware of that are quickly listed here is specifically for the Village Council. You have your Village Charter, which talks about your membership. It talks about roles and responsibilities, elections, appointments, calling meetings to order, things of that nature from a procedural standpoint. From the Planning Commission and DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, one of the practicing procedures that we utilize to outline what a meeting should look like and things of that nature are bylaws. And so hopefully you've had, you're aware of those that specific document that kind of leads you through what should be conducted during that meeting, public comment, conflict of interest, and we'll go more into depth on what bylaws provide and what those specifically say. And so statutorily, we are required to have bylaws for the Planning Commission. It clarifies the chair and secretary that have very specific duties associated with the Michigan enabling legislation. It talks about how meetings are called to order, structure of an agenda, and voting procedures. That's very similar in the DDA as well. Normally, with those different bylaws, they amend any amendments to those rules or those bylaws. Those are done with that. They set annual meeting dates or a calendar. As part of the Planning Commission, you're required to come with an annual report that is written. It gives you a summary of what activities took place in that following year, and we recommend having goals associated with that. And then what's required as part of the DDA and Planning Commission is in clarification of what a conflict of interest is and how do you address that. And we'll go into that term in a little bit as well. So all of our different meetings are subject to Open Meetings Act and are subject to Freedom of Information requests, so FOIAs. And so some of the different main key points is to remember that all of our meetings are considered open to the public. They have the ability to make those, we want to make decisions specifically in the public realm. We don't want to be doing that over email. So if you receive an email and everyone's CC'd on it, make sure not to reply all and deliberate towards something. You want to acknowledge I received the email and leave it at that. A lot of those decisions really need to be taking place during that public meeting. If you have questions, feel free to respond to staff is best practice to get your answers or things of that nature. But we don't want to have a virtual online meeting because you can't have proxy voting and things of that nature. And so one other thing that's prohibited, so if you're doing a public hearing or things of that nature, is that you can't restrict someone entry if they're not willing to give you their address or name or register. That's something that's sometimes confused, but you statutorily can't require someone during a public comment if they want to say, hello, I am resident number 1, and that's how they'd like to identify themselves. So you have to accept that and let them speak towards public comment. A lot of communities, you'll encourage them to say, can you please say your name and address so you have some reference? But if they choose to decline to provide that information, you still have to allow them to speak just like any other member. And then in the minutes, you just recommend as resident number 1. And so that's a best practice that sometimes people get confused on. You must allow people to address the meeting, though we can have different rules and stipulations to help during a public comment period to keep it more straightforward. So if we have a public hearing at the Planning Commission, we have a group of 50 individuals that like to express their opinion one way or the other, we can make sure that the rules are applied equally to say everyone gets 2 minutes. You get 1 2-minute period. And so you lay out those rules before the meeting starts. That should be indicated in your bylaws, those time frames. And so you're trying to ensure that you're treating everyone the same, but also making sure that everyone's aware of what that standard is. And so with those different public comments, one of the other official duties is talking about the record and procedure and filing. That's all through the clerk, in which we're looking at that public record. Mainly, it's looking at those minutes. That is a summary of what happened during that meeting, decisions, and things of that nature. And so it's important when you're looking at those and approving those, that those are accurate, specifically retelling what's going on, because you can't, if you were to go to litigation or thinking back on a decision, you have to go based on what is written in the minutes. You can't go, well, I remember that we told him he had to also paint the building. Recollection is not the same thing as what you put in those minutes, what you put in a condition of an approval. And so those different parts, as you keep through, look through those minutes, and you're making sure that that's an accurate representation of what that decision was and those parameters with it. So one of those things specifically more applicable to the Planning Commission, but every so often also happens with Village Council, is that there's a specific site that's of request. And it is strongly encouraged that you can have a totally different opinion about something if you go and see it in person. And so site visits can be really helpful in helping making that decision. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that a majority of the membership doesn't directly constitute a meeting. Just because you're all at the same bar one night, coincidentally, does not mean, oh no, we have an open meeting. You have to cash out and leave. That it's the idea that you're meeting and then you're talking about business that's coming, pending on the agenda or is on the agenda, and you're deliberating towards a decision. A lot of communities, if you're having a scheduled field trip, so you're indicating the applicant said, well, I'll open my property for an hour, you can come tour it. That's recommended that you would host it as a public meeting. So the public is allowed to be part of that decision-making process, especially if you know that the applicant's going to want to talk to you specifically, and you have a majority of the membership there. Otherwise, if you have, over the course of the week, each individual decides to go to a site and look at it, that's not Open Meeting Act issue, it's a site visit. So just keep in mind, if you're going to field trip over with a few different individuals on the same board, please let village staff know, just so that we can verify, is this something that we need to be aware of publishing as a meeting, or is there something that's staggered, or do you understand those? We don't want to be talking about content that's pending a decision outside of that meeting. Individuals visiting sites, just because you're on the planning commission or some type of village official doesn't give you the right to trespass. So we've had some interesting situations sometimes, but it's best to, again, coordinate with village staff. If that is of interest and you would like to go further into the property, especially, I don't know that the village is as applicable, but some of those deep lots and things of that nature can be hard to see just standing on the road or in a parking lot. I'd really like to see what's going on in the building or something of that nature. And so just coordinate with village staff on that. And then make sure, if you are in a situation where you're talking with an applicant or you're in the grocery store talking with some neighbor and things of that interest, and I'll get into this a little bit later, is that you want to make sure that it's really easy on site to say, well, do you think this evervite buffer is sufficient? Well, now you're talking about very specific business matter, and it's just you and the applicant. And so it's best practice to stay away from talking about things that are going to be talked about, because you'd save that for the meeting. And so we're going to get into ex parte contact, but that's something that we encourage, is to have those conversations in a public forum so everyone is hearing that context. And so then everyone feels that they're part of that discussion. So unlike the legislative body or the DDA, the Planning Commission is required to meet at least 4 times a year. And so that is one of the unique things that is statutorily required. Now, conflict of interest. So specifically with that, it's when you have something that is either perceived or actually something that would potentially affect your decision that has a personal self-interest. And so typically what that means is you're talking about that you own the property. And so if you're on the site plan, if you're in the planning commission, you're reviewing the site plan for your own building, you kind of want it to go forward. And so that's a direct conflict of interest. Are you financially tied to that situation? Is that your brother that's being asked, can I have a site plan or get a variance or an exception to the rule? And so those are very common examples associated with conflict of interest. And so specifically in the bylaws associated with the Planning Commission and the bylaws associated with the DDA, there's slightly different definitions, but they generally hit those same themes. So it's when you have a very close related relationship with that individual. It's when you have a financial tie specifically. In the DDAs, it lists some of those relationships, as opposed to the Planning Commission, it's a little bit more broad. And then the other thing that's unique specifically with the Planning Commission is because we have a lot of site-specific situation, it's when you're located within 300 feet of that situation. That could potentially impact you from that perspective. And so when you anticipate there's either the potential for a conflict of interest, it can be, again, it's about public perception. A lot of us as public figures, either if you're appointed member or an elected official, it's important to show that level of transparency. And that's really the intent behind conflict of interest, is to show that transparency. And so with that conflict of interest, if you anticipate that there could be something that's associated with it, by the Planning Commission, the member themselves indicates that they think there might be a conflict of interest. And so they would like to recuse themselves or abstain from that discussion or making that vote. Because you're, as part of a conflict of interest, you don't want to be influencing a decision. You've indicated you have a conflict. And so you shouldn't be engaging typically in the conversation or deliberation, and you shouldn't be voting on it. Specifically in the DDA, they do theirs by vote of other members. So typically the individual would say, I have a potential conflict of interest. I am the applicant for a facade loan program, and so therefore I'm going to abstain from that discussion. Then the remaining members say, I agree with you. We think that's a conflict of interest. You would be abstaining. So it's not just the member, it's a voting of the board, which can help sometimes with the more odd situation where it's my niece's second cousin or something like that, where you can have a close relationship because it's a small town, but at the same time, or an employment situation, sometimes it's, well, my aunt works for that company or something of that nature. And so that method allows you to have more of that thoughtful discussion. But it's important, if you think you might have a potential conflict of interest, let the village staff know. They can help you with that information, or again, just volunteer it at a meeting. Do you guys think this is an issue or not? And so that way you can try to be as transparent as possible. And so you want to make sure, again, that you're not voting on the matter. We encourage that you don't participate in the decision as part of that discussion, because you're influencing that. And then if it is an extremely passionate issue, to make sure that if you need to, leave the table. So there is case law in some situations where it's a very heated situation and the planning commission chairperson said, well, I have a conflict of interest. I'm against this project. It's right next door to me, things of that nature. They left the table. He went to the back of the room and then was still directing the meeting, because they had it on camera, where they turned around to the PC chair and you could see him nodding yes, nodding no. And the PC was directly taking direction based on that individual. And so that became that very real conflict of interest, and you're still influencing. And so again, that's case law. We don't want to be doing that. And that's something to keep top of mind. Any questions so far? Okay. Next, from a concept perspective, is ex parte contact. And so this is when there's a decision that's pending discussion by the board. And so it's not encouraged to discuss outside of a meeting. Generally is discouraged, specifically in the situation when you're making the final decision. And part of that is a transparency component. So the Planning Commission in a text amendment or a rezoning isn't making the final decision. They're making a recommendation to the legislative body. And so if the Planning Commission talks about it with the applicant outside of the meeting, they're not the final authority, but the village council would be. And so best practice is that you try not to talk about items that are coming up on the agenda until you get to the public meeting situation, just to make sure that everyone can hear that same conversation. So if a property owner next door tells you all these horror stories that are happening with this property, they are hopefully being able to either communicate in writing as a public comment or come to the meeting to indicate that, rather than you being the surrogate for that information. And so it's always encouraged. We love to hear those public comments. You never want to turn down a neighbor from bending your ear, but at the same time, you don't want to be the representative, per se, of that specific opinion. And so it's best practice to have them voice in their own words what that opinion is. The applicant can hear it, everyone else in the public can hear it, and you can then respond to some of those different things. And so that's best practice associated with ex parte contact. Yes.
Does that fall under, like, if there's a village staff and a council member or planning commission member, if they call and ask a question, is that?
That is not ex
Consider-
parte contact.
Okay.
So if you're talking to a specific staff person, that's generally their role. They're not part of the decision. They're helping you find information. And so you individually emailing someone for a follow-up question, same thing if you're a planning commission member and you want to email the chair to just check what's on the agenda or something, that's okay too. It's talking about when you're specifically the conflict of interest is when you're deliberating towards a decision, and specifically on those outside influences, and trying to make sure not that it's directly parallel to a courtroom, but the idea that everyone's able to understand what's being said. And so, great clarification. And so when somebody does talk to you about some of the things that come up is if you're doing a site visit or something of that nature, let me show you around. Let me kind of show you the thing that we're arguing about or things of that nature. Again, site visits are great, but keep in mind you don't want to be deliberating towards you think that's okay or you think it's ridiculous, giving that opinion. You're allowed to say, well, I understand what you're telling me. I'll take a few pictures and hope to see you at the meeting, something of that nature. Same thing with being in a small town and people bumping into you at the grocery store. It's very common, and you indicate that I hear what you're saying, and I really encourage you to write a notice or write to us so then we can provide that. Or if you feel comfortable coming to the meeting, I'd love to have that opinion so everyone can hear it. And so that's the recommendation, is best practice is to encourage them in their own words to say that, because you don't want to be having that private conversation specifically with an applicant and appear that that conversation is tainting your decision and therefore you appear to be biased. Because, oh, well, we went out to coffee and I talked to them for an hour or so, and I really think that this project will be fine, and I told them it would be fine, things of that nature. So switching gears a little bit, a lot of our different administrative decisions, specifically for the Planning Commission, we have various standards that are associated with those approvals. And so we need to make sure that when we look at those standards, we're basing it on facts as best you can. Does it meet the zoning ordinance requirement or doesn't it meet the zoning requirements? And so looking at making sure that that is also the basis for your decision. We're approving this site plan because it meets all of the different stipulation and it meets all of the standards. Some communities choose to make separate motions associated with fact finding, associated with approval or disapproval, which I'll get into a little bit when we talk about conditions and things of that nature. But the idea is that we want to make sure that there's easily a reason that we can point to, specifically in the case of a denial. There's a lot of case law in municipalities. If they deny something, you have to state why, and it can't just be, we don't like the application. It has to relate to the standards of approval or procedure, or does it consist with our design style, standards, or does it match our components associated with the amount that we do allocate for a DDA fund or something of that nature. And so then you can point to that statutorily to make sure that you're making that decision. So one of the things that's really common more in the Planning Commission realm is that you put in conditions. And so some of the most important parts about conditions is that you make sure that they relate to your standards. So specifically 804 is the one for special land uses. And so when you look at these standards, if you hear the theme about is cohesive with the surrounding area, is compatible, you want to make sure that it's that the use is able to be sufficiently maintained by the utilities and public services. Those are general, where again, the government is looking out for the good of the community type principles. And so you want to make sure that that's something that you can relate your condition to, in addition to it being reasonable. So in a situation where you have a special land use and they're looking to do a building addition, and you say, well, with that building addition to have a auto repair shop, we also want you to donate 50 feet for an easement so we can put a sidewalk or a pathway in here. That's not directly related to the request that's being asked. They're asking to do a building addition and you want property. And so it's very important. There's a lot of case law on making sure that conditions are reasonable and rational and proportionate to what the request is. So in the situation where there is a auto repair shop and there's a single family home nearby or a multiple family complex, saying, you know what, we know that there's going to be a lot of drills and noise and things of that nature. So we're, as a condition, we want another row of evergreen trees that help with screening, help with a little bit of noise dampening. Hours of operation is really common to put as a condition, as a special land use, to limit hours. So that way you're less likely to have noise at certain hours that are just inappropriate. And so conditions are a great way to, again, clarify those different decisions and to make sure that those stipulations are understood by both parties. Now, crafting of motions can be very tricky and can be very complex. However complex you want to make a motion, you can do that. But some of the very important simple components of crafting a motion is to remember the action. Are you approving it? Are you tabling it? Are you postponing it? And then you're looking at the location. Is it location based? Is there a parcel I can tie to it, an address that I can tie to it? What's being done? Is it an approval? A site plan? Is it a facade program, grant, or things of that nature? Is it a sidewalk that we're approving? Make sure that there's some context specifically associated with that description. And then if there's any conditions, that should be part of the motion. So as I mentioned, additional trees, hours of operation, those different things are very helpful in creating those motions. And so one of the things is, though you can have suggested motions that staff provides you to clarify some different things, it's really important that you read those motions out loud and that it's very clear what the motion is. If you're not clear what the motion is at any point in time, feel free to say, can I have the motion read back? Because it's really important, and you can make some very deny to approve type situations when someone initially crafts a motion. And so if you don't understand the vote to deny is the motion on the table, oh, you thought it was yay to approve, that can be a very different meeting outcome that you were expecting. And so if you're ever concerned about the motion or anything of that nature, just ask for it to be read back and make sure that you understand what is being voted on. So as I mentioned earlier, we talked about abstaining due to conflict of interest. And so with that, that is when you are not casting a vote. Otherwise, it's every member's duty to vote unless you have, again, that direct conflict of interest. This is specific primarily of planning commission members and things of that nature where you can have a controversial issue. But that is why you are appointed and paid the big bucks, is to help make decisions. And so part of that is ensuring that you're fulfilling those duties and obligations in making some of those hard decisions. And so in abstaining, a member is not preventing from voting for him or herself from a position. So if you wanted to elect yourself as treasurer or things of that nature, or not treasurer, the chairperson or things of that nature, typically best practice is you don't vote for yourself. But there isn't anything statutorily, if you do, to keep the meeting moving, that you can't do that. Same thing with a chairperson leading a meeting. Unless your bylaws say something very specifically otherwise, you can make motions and second motions. You're an active voting member still of that board. And then abstaining votes count towards majority. So depending on some decisions, typically if you have a quorum, the majority of the membership, that is what results in a decision. There are some different situations with the Zoning Board of Appeals or different statutory things that require not a majority of the quorum, but a majority of the membership. So even if you're absent, you have to make sure that instead of a 7-member vote, you still have to have 5 that vote in one way. And so that's clarification on when you're looking at majority of the membership versus just the quorum. And so luckily the DDA, you don't have too many of those type decisions. So it's mainly just majority of the membership. So now I'm going to exit a little bit of the generic best practices and things of that nature regarding meetings and things of that nature, and going to segue into the master plan, what it is. Is there any questions from what I talked about earlier? Does anyone know what the master plan is? All right, a little bit. So one of the really important reasons why we have a master plan is that you're statutorily required to, because you have a zoning ordinance. And so to have rules and regulation on what buildings look like and things of that nature, you have to have it be based on a plan. And so the master plan is that plan. And so that is something that to have zoning, you have to have that. We're going to see how far we can go. one of the things with the planning practice is it goes through this 5 steps, and your master plan generally follows these 5 processes. And so you talk about in your master plan, where are we at today? It's really important to get a snapshot of where are we now to evaluate those different decisions. So that's your demographics information, that's your natural features, existing land uses, some of the current condition of roadways and things, sidewalks, talking about community facilities, schools, police force, other public services. So that way you know where to start. The next step is, what do you want to go towards tomorrow? And this is talking about your visioning component. This part of your master plan is talking about your goals and strategies. So you have that specific section that's outlined in your master plan. And we did a very thorough job last 5-year review cycle and going through what are our overarching ideas. And next is talking about what is the best way to get there. And so as part of that, you have your future land use map, but we also have different aspirations associated with the thoroughfare plan, talking about what level of improvements we want to make and things of that nature. So now we're trying to think of what's the best way to get there. What are different alternatives, and vetting those different things out. And that's part of the master plan, is to give some of that guidance, but not have it overly detailed to the point that you're stuck in a very narrow lens, unless you know 110% that's what we want to do. Otherwise, it's meant to be more broad and giving you a general guiding purpose. Then we have a let's get there portion. So as part of that, we have over 5 years, 5 things that we wanted to do, and we did a really good job doing most of those things. So one of the things that were previously in there is talking about blight residential structures and working on mitigation, those different blight influences. We talked about conducting a study to look at the cost-effective extensions of water and sewer, which was conducted. We made amendments to the master plan, and now in 2023, we're looking at doing that 5-year review. As part of that implementation, we took all of our different very specific action items when we talked about goals and how do we achieve them and prioritize them. And so we'll review those again during the master plan process to see that we align. And then as part of this 5-year review, it's talking about, are we there yet? Is the plan achieved everything that we were hoping to achieve? In the upcoming update, we're planning on having some public engagement as well. And so input from the specific public specifically on potential different alternatives and things of that nature that we didn't do last cycle. And so that's part of that guiding principle. It does include different goals and things with the DDA. You're a big part of our commercial core. And so that's something that we hope to be collaborative with that body on, because it's a major part of how do we see going in the future. Zoning impacts, what do the buildings look like? What level of detail? You have the most beautiful Dollar General in Lapeer County, and that's because of your zoning requirements and the testament to your Zoning Board of Appeals and your Planning Commission and your Village Council for setting you up for success to have a product that results in something like that, as opposed to, no offense to those that like the other run-of-the-mill boxes that they otherwise propose. So one of the key different things when I talk about the master plan, I talked about the future land use plan, which talks about kind of a 20-year vision of where do we want to go, generally speaking. And when I talked about the zoning ordinance, that's your rules and regulation. That's what you can do with this property now, and that's what the rules are associated with it now. And so the future land use map can say, well, we're thinking this might be a good candidate for commercial or a multiple planned unit development or a multiple family. That doesn't mean that it's actually something you can do right now. It's when it's in the zoning map and you go through zoning, that's what triggers, that's what you can do, that action. And so that's the correlation between the two, is you try to make sure that your master plan generally puts you in the right ballgame, and your zoning ordinances, this is what you have to do. And so our zoning map looks generally like this. And so you have your residential yellow, you have your mobile home park, you have your multiple family, the commercial, which is your red downtown, and then your general commercial, the pink. You have your industrial, which is that purple. You have office, which is blue, so it's like 2 or 3 properties on Van Dyke. And then you have a parking district and you have the planned unit development specifically. So that's kind of your catch-all category for mixed use in very specific cases. As opposed to your future land use map, which it looks extremely similar. The biggest change is the giant green blob that's over here. That was projected to be planned unit development. And so we're not sure that that will probably be something that we maintain in the upcoming revisiting of it due to the speculation of what they would like to do with the property. Typically, planned unit developments are higher density and multi-use. So that's, I think, going to be a big conversation to have is there something that we want to clarify where we're willing to give more growth? Specifically, one of the biggest factors on villages is talking about lot sizes. And so are we changing lot sizes, which directly relate to zoning districts, increased density or not density? And so that's part of that conversation that we'll probably have is, do we see areas where we don't want it to be single family, want it to be multiple family? Do we want to see where you can have homes closer together or no? And so that's part of one of the bigger things with the future land use map is you're putting a general pathway that we're interested in seeing this. The village has never taken the stance that we're going to rezone this and now they're matching. It's really common that your future land use map is a little bit more broad and a little bit more, what is it envisioning? Do you see wanting more growth and more density, or do you want to see, generally speaking, maintaining what we have, or even in some areas de-intensifying it, if that's the desire? So with that, that is the full presentation. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. Is there any questions for me? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Thank you. Okay. It's the next step with regard to this.
So the next step in the process with their master plan is the Planning Commission at Elmont Township had made a recommendation on that proposal. So because it is a joint master plan, we are working with both communities on that visioning. So we do plan on a few joint meetings, specifically between the Planning Commission of the township and the Planning Commission of the zoning, or the of the village and the township, to hopefully come together, hopefully at the beginning of the process, sometime in the middle, and then probably at the end, to try to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, because we as a community have a vested interest in each other's success. And so they recommended pretty much doing the base scope plus doing a sidewalk evaluation. And so at the upcoming March Planning Commission meeting, it's anticipated the Planning Commission at the village will look at that proposal and then provide recommendations to then the village council. And then at the village council level will also be then in March when it goes to the township board. And then we will be discussing what that full scope is. I know at one point the different cost and how you would share that different cost with the update. That will be discussed and verified. Same thing with the level of public engagement. So the Township Planning Commission said if there's budget constraints, we'd like to do these 2 forms, but if we could, do all 3. One of the things that Mr. Trent is investigating is public funding that would be available through the Redevelopment Ready Community Program. And so we're exercising if there's some different things we can do that way. They do love funding public engagement and some things of that nature. And so we're hopeful that that will work out to help save us some money in the long run. So that's the tentative plan. We're hoping that we would have a schedule out sometime probably in April. So that way you can pace along with us in the project. And we're going to try to make sure that we keep everyone abridged on that public engagement and love to have everyone a part of that.
Okay, now we know everything. Thank you. Okay. Regular agenda item number 2, work order system and resident alert system. Mr. Trent, is this yours?
Actually, it's mine.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, I looked at the wrong memo. Sorry.
We did a thorough discussion of the work order and resident alert system at the last meeting. Council did have some questions. And in your packet is their response to it. They did increase their service level availability to 99.9%. And then he gave an example of what they do as far as their backups. I'm satisfied with the backup, but I want to see what council feels about it.
I don't think there's something to do about it if they're not redundant, because that means they're not. What it means is if more, so the cloud is a room of servers, and on those servers is this application that you'd be accessing through the cloud. So what they're saying is they've got multiple servers within this data center that if this box goes out, it's on this box. What Pete and I were talking about last time is if this entire data center goes down, they don't have a secondary data center or a secondary location where another server sits that would pick up the access so you could still access it. So what they're saying is if something happens to one of the server boxes in their data center where they're at now goes down, they've got it on another one, it would transpose over. If that entire data center goes down, then you're down. And if they don't have a dual data center, there's really nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, I mean,
Would you agree with that summarization?
yeah, I agree. I mean, they made it clear that we're not going to lose our data. They have, redundant backups and saving and et cetera, third party offsite saving of the backup. But yeah, it's what we were talking about is if they had a redundant system outside of a certain geographic area. So if there's a power outage on the East Coast, the Midwest could pick up. They don't have that. I don't think that they'd offer it. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody at this level would. So.
But the criticality of the system being down, I mean, worst case, we could handbrake, and then
Right.
once it's back
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
it's not like input.
We're not shutting down the water system or
Right.
police dispatch or anything like that.
And
Right.
the fact that they have backup on our data is probably more important for this type of system than having dual redundancy at two different data centers. Would be my opinion.
So with that, I'm still recommending that we go with Novo Solutions, excluding the citizen portal for now, until staff can get acquainted with it, become experts at it before we send it out to the residents. So we know we can troubleshoot for them if they have, questions or concerns about the system. And as far as the Nixle system, like I said, we can piggyback off Lapeer County, and it's only $500 annually. And Jeff from Central Dispatch did say that he would come on site to train me on that.
Your baby.
So you want a motion?
Yes, please, if it's okay with council.
So I will make the motion to approve the work order software with Novo Solutions in the amount of $11,440, currently excluding Citizen Portal, and the Nixle Event Bridge for $500 annually.
Motion made by Councilmember Feldman, supported by President Pro Tem Dyke, to proceed with Novo Solutions as set forth on the record. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously approved by those council members in attendance. Welcome. Thanks for the thorough working over this issue, due diligence. Regular agenda item number 3, MDOT contract category B project.
Mr. President and Council, a few months ago, you'll recall that we were awarded the Category B grant from MDOT with a matching amount of just under $85,000. It takes a few months for MDOT to process paperwork. This past 2 weeks, we did receive the contract that's before you tonight. It's the basic legalese that MDOT puts together. The key points of the contract that I could refer you to are on page 1 that identifies the project itself. This is the road projects for Allison Drive, Janet Lane, St. Joseph Court, and Dawn Drive, and a portion of June as well. And our estimated cost for this project is just under $170,000. And the cost aspect is referenced on the bottom of page 4, section 5, and also in the attached exhibit I, which breaks that down too. They're very specific about having a resolution that references the contract number and who is the authorized official to sign the contract. So as part of the motion for recommendation is to accept to adopt the resolution approving the contract and authorizing myself to execute the contract.
So we have been addressing this project for quite some time. It's been a rather thorough review of the topic in the past. We have further discussion this evening regarding
So our portion.
Category B project.
Yeah, so our portion of it is going to cover, I read this whole contract, holy smokes. Essentially the project management of the project, it sounds like.
Sorry, say that again, the project?
Our half of it, so the non-grant portion is going to have to cover the project management portion of the project because
Exactly.
their dollars will not cover that.
So once we obtain bids at our next meeting, we'll have a contract proposal from Fleece and Vandenbrink for a project of this nature. MDOT does require some engineering support. So they've put together a proposal that I'll bring forward to you in 2 weeks. And we have to cover that portion of the cost because it's not covered under this grant project.
As anticipated, which we would be doing.
Make a motion?
Sure, and may I just one quick comment?
Sure.
Being red pen as far as editing, the resolution, the now therefore paragraph, the Village of Almont agrees to enter into, I would like the word a contract, because the contract there almost turns contract into a verb instead of a noun. Contract's a thing, and is enter into like contracting, I don't know, spasms or something. So is it possible to stick in that word, please? Sorry, Jackie.
Okay. I recommend council approve resolution 2023-02-02 to enter into the contract with MDOT for road projects identified in the contract and authorize the village manager to sign and execute the contract.
Motion made by Councilmember Colacott, supported by Councilmember Glasser, to approve the resolution for the Category B project. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Feldman. Glasser. Halka.
Aye.
Dyke. Schneider.
The MDOT contract is unanimously approved by those council members in attendance. Regular agenda item number 4, the Comcast contract. And so that's yours, Mr. Trent?
Yes, it is.
Why when I read this right away, why the switch from Charter to Comcast?
Actually,
It's not a switch, right?
Comcast wants to enter into the marketplace here. And just as some friendly background information, I just happened to stumble across as I was looking for some history on another project. I became aware of the fact that in April of 2021, this council did approve an application from Comcast to come forward with a desire to enter into the marketplace. And this is now, almost 2 years later, the contract that is being submitted. Back in 2020, you folks extended the contract with Spectrum, also known as Charter, for a 10-year period with a 5% franchise fee. And so the Uniform Video Franchise Act, dictated by statute, says that you cannot charge a higher franchise fee than what the incumbent provider has been charged. So Spectrum, Comcast is basically asking for a 5% franchise fee, 10-year term, and it's a basic uniform franchise agreement that's pretty standard throughout the industry.
So Comcast would be in addition to? So both
They
Charter
lay
and Comcast
fiber
would
and
be
they
available?
obtain customers, and we would get quarterly updates on how much their revenue is and what our 5% of the cut is.
Blanks that we saw when we were reviewing this, at least online, would be filled in at 5%?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion?
Is there any language in the current contract with the current provider that prohibits other providers coming into this area, or can they be? Okay. I just want to make sure there's no contract.
It's an open marketplace.
Does that allow-
10-year term is by statute, right?
I don't know if it's by statute, but it seems to be commonplace, and they've asked for a 10-year term as well. Or let's say that's what the contract specifies, and I'm recommending you have that as part of your motion. So, and it's very similar to what you folks approved for the Charter contract back in 2020.
And that is one of the biggest complaints you hear around town, is that you only have one provider to choose from. And if you have it out with your provider, you're pretty much without internet.
Sound like there's any good reason not to go forward with this. Do we have a motion?
Comcast and authorize the village manager to sign and execute the agreement.
Supporting? You are? Okay.
Tim beat me to it. He sits closer to Steve.
Yeah, way over there. A motion made by Councilmember Glasser, supported by President Pro Tem Dyke, to approve the Comcast local franchise agreement as set forth on the record. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously approved by those council members in attendance. Next, on the regular agenda, number 5, electronic packets. I like keyboards, but
Me
Right.
too.
Well,
screens,
And
Never
I
works
did
for me.
bounce ideas off off a couple of council members,
So,
so.
just my personal preference.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and that makes sense, because really what these are going to be used for are, one, to have electronic packets to view, and two, to respond for village emails. And it's very hard to do that on a tablet. So I'm assuming the consensus will be to go with a keyboard laptop version. I did include cost estimates of the tablet and the IdeaPad. We also got a quote from IT Right, which I handed out at the beginning of the meeting. So I just want some discussion from council as to where we want to go forward. Also, we have been trying to contact another company, CDW, who has a MyDeal contract. When I looked on their website, what was available, it was all desktop versions, but we're trying to make contact with the sales rep to see if there's any other options available.
One step you might want to take also is contact Micro Center in Madison Heights, because that's where the information I provided you for the IdeaPad was. Because I know we probably don't want to go with Windows 11 Home. You probably want to go with Windows 11 Pro or and with 360 Office 365 if you can get it. But you might want to talk to somebody there and give them the specifications and see if they would be able to provide something. Right.
Another issue I was also running into is availability. Because when I chatted with the gentleman online, we were limited to only purchasing 2.
That's why I would contact them and say, this is our situation, this is what we need. If they've got somebody contacting them, they might be able to work with you with something else they have that's comparable. And because they're going to want your business.
Was everybody acceptable to the specifications of the IdeaPad, or do we want to go with something like the Chromebook that was recommended by IT Right? Because there was a little bit of a price jump between the two.
Personally, I'm fine with the Lenovo. It's fine.
Yeah,
We don't necessarily
Plus,
need-
it has more storage. It looks like it has more storage. But if they're only limiting to 2 and can't do the other specifications, then I would talk to them and say, with these kind of specifications and price point, or a price point that's in between that and the Chromebooks that you're saying here, see if they can provide you with something.
They also did say on that particular IdeaPad, it only comes with the Windows Home. There is no option of the Windows Pro. But I can make contact with them and see if they can recommend a different type.
Availability is that a supply chain issue?
Yes.
That's
Chips.
my guess, yes.
So Micro Center, though, I mean, I would really call them. They're only one in the state here, but they're in like 10 or 12 states, so they have a pretty big supply chain. I mean, usually they have 10 or 12 of the same laptop when you go down to Madison Heights. They're just stacked up. Because they're kind of a self-builder type shop, but they do sell complete units.
Okay.
And if you have discussions with them and have questions, feel free to reach out to Peter or myself. And
Yeah, because I'm a button pusher. I just keep pushing buttons till it works. So as far as specs, yes, I'm going to rely on you heavily.
Should we table for now?
Yeah, I'll get more information and come back. Thank you.
It's on this issue. Okay, regular agenda item number 6. Did you want to go home now, Brian? Or you want this truck, right? Yeah. No. Kidding. Yeah.
So it's
in this upcoming budget year, or our capital improvement plan, we actually have to replace this truck in 2023. Well, as Kim mentioned with my deal, the first thing I did was contact my deal. And everything on my deal says contact dealer, no price. And I missed a window last year to order a truck to have it by this year. Didn't expect that. Okay. So I searched further and tried to find some trucks. If you're looking at your agenda, the Dodge dealer in Lapeer, they are getting a truck. They can't tell me when, but it is not like to our spec. So, and they want $73,000 for just the truck. I have to have $30,000 worth of equipment put on it, as far as snow plows, salt spreader, and a box. Skipping over the second one, which would be my pick, I found a 2019 for $76,000 with 21,000 miles on it. That is a complete truck, but it's white and it's a little bit bigger than what we need. And then, you know, of course, I got a hold of Linco. They have 23 or 32 F550s coming in, maybe in May. They ordered them last year, and they can build me a complete truck for $114,000. So we came, you know, we searched heavy, me and my guys. We found a complete truck, an F350. They are holding it for me for a total of $63,000. It is the perfect replacement of the current truck that we have. It has a 60-inch cab to axle, which is what we want. It already has a body on it. The only thing I have to do is put a plow. And we'll worry about that after July when the budget starts. $8,000 for the one that we're going to put on that. Like
8,800.
8,800 or something.
Do you have it? I have 8,200. But maybe you have a
But
different
if
number.
there was $600 worth,
Yeah, we get a 600, we can install that ourselves. My guys can do that and save $600. So that would be a cash and carry from a local place. So I guess I'm here asking if we can replace our 20 some odd year old truck for the one at Fox Motors for $63,787. This, as we started our budget year, this is not included in this year's budget. It really wouldn't. You want to talk a little bit about that before I say something wrong?
no, go ahead.
So, as we started the budget process, I've started my budget process already. This is why I'm coming across this stuff now. I really wouldn't come to you until July, but because of the shortage, we did that last year with the leaf machine. We came to you guys a little bit early. But if we purchase this now, this still doesn't affect this year's, but it won't be until next year's budget. We don't. Kim, you need to talk.
Right. No, that's fine. That's fine.
That's
We
your
would, we
thing.
would do the installment purchase contract. Tri-County Bank did offer us a 4% loan. And with their contract, we sign it, like, say, this month. Our first payment won't be until February of 24, so it won't affect this current year budget. It will affect next year's budget.
Is it 4%?
Mhm.
And in past times, because they were passed, typically the interest rate would be 2%, but because of what's happened at Federal Reserve,
Correct.
so it's now, interest is doubled.
So
Good, okay.
If we're doing an installment plan, what was the total budget in the capital improvement fund for this, and what would be the payment for 23B?
I estimated the amortization to be about $7,900 a year. I can't remember what we budgeted in the capital improvement plan, though.
I can't remember either, but by then, we just paid off we
Trucks.
paid off our 2018, and by the time we start paying on this one, we'll have another truck paid off as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and if you look, it's way under. And if you look, they gave us a $4,500. He's the only dealership that gave us a $4,500 government discount on that. No, but it's funny because I just found a picture of that the other day and I showed somebody. But now is the time to move that truck because of the resale. People.
We talked about it, and you think you can get a pretty decent return for it at this stage, correct?
Yeah, I really do. If we can get that in the auction this spring, it's actually going to work out good. I bet you it'd probably cover that first payment, to be honest with you. And that's because of the engine that it has. Of course, I've been down this, I explained this to you guys before. We have very low miles on our vehicles, but everything else falls apart. The doors, the seats, gear shifts, everything else. So there will be people that will want that for the motor or transmission and stuff like that.
It's a pre-DEF engine, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
which is why we kind of want to stay under that with a gas engine, because we already have two vehicles that are kind of complicated for us to. You can't keep DEF fluid on the shelf. It has a shelf life. So you rely on the local hardware store, but they're not open on Sundays, so you have to keep some in stock. So yeah, this truck does not, I didn't want to replace it with a diesel for that same reason, that in 20 years, we will have this truck for 20 years, that, the body falls apart and the engine is still good.
And again, that 7,900 annual payment is based on a 10-year amortization. Again, so we'll have 10 years, debt-free. Yeah.
And to mention my memo, the money that the older truck's starting to cost us too. And it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep going. So, and at one time that was the only salt truck the village had. So that's why it's in this bad shape as it is, because for the first 10 years or 15 years of that truck's life, it was the salt. It was in salt. We didn't have power washer, so we weren't getting the salt washed off it. So we take much better care of our equipment and have better ways to take care of our equipment now. So.
Ford F-350 from Fox Ford Grand Rapids and for the price of $63,787.
Motion by President Pro Tem Dykes, supported by Councilmember Glasser. Okay. We didn't finish voting, so maybe it's not, who knows?
They haven't voted yet.
Who knows?
So you don't know yet.
Yeah, supported by Councilmember Glasser, to grant authorization to replace the F-350 one-ton DPW as proposed and set forth on the record. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Objections? Unanimously approved by those council members in attendance. Now is the time for public comment for any non-agenda item. Any public comment this evening for non-agenda? There being none. So, Manager Trent, anything to bring to council?
Just three quick things. I wanted to let you know that last week I was invited, along with other community leaders from Lapeer, Shiawassee, and Genesee County, to attend a economic development forum that was hosted by U of M Flint personnel. And the reason U of M Flint personnel are involved in this process is that this area has not had an approved SEDS plan that would enable Lapeer County to be able to apply for some federal funding through the Economic Development Administration, which is part of the Department of Commerce. And apparently we've been vacant, if you will, for years in that regard. And so somebody from Uncle Sam actually contacted U of M Flint and asked if they would help spearhead some discussion. And so over the last several months, they've put together a steering committee, and this forum that I attended last week was an opportunity to hear what this process is all about and the opportunity to supply projects for consideration by the steering committee that would be ultimately approved this summer and then submitted to Uncle Sam, where we would then have an approved SEDS plan that would enable us to apply for future grants over the next 5-year period. And so I threw out on the table an opportunity for us to resurface the roads in our industrial park and also possibly expand our water and sewer infrastructure for future projects that might come about, where we would be able to utilize some federal funding to help us in that endeavor. And not that we would have to shoulder that expense, but if there's a developer that wants to knock on our door, let's say 3 years from now, and needs to have water and sewer extended into the township area with a 50% grant from the Uncle Sam, they could shoulder the rest of it. So that's part of the strategy. Wanted to let you know this opportunity because I have to submit our plan requests by next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. That's the deadline. So this is something we just became aware of last week and attended this meeting. So I wanted to let you know that we're always looking for ways that we can improve our infrastructure and utilize some grant monies to help us in that endeavor. Also, just this afternoon, you'll recall that we applied for a community-funded initiative with Congresswoman McLean's office last year. I got an email today from Senator Peters' staff letting us know that he's open to receiving requests for him to consider to put in next year's appropriation bill. And so we're going to review those opportunities as well. The deadline to submit any requests to his office is March 15. I will come forward at our next meeting on March 7th with some proposals for your consideration that you might like to approve for me submitting on the village's behalf.
That's kind of interesting from a relativity standpoint. McLean is a relatively new member of the House of Representatives, and Peters has been around for a while now, so he's acquired some seniority. So might help, actually gain more of a foothold with him. So good to hear. Okay, great.
And next month, I'll be attending the Michigan Downtown Association Legislative Day and Conference. And as part of that endeavor, I'm part of the legislative committee for the MDA. And we've already been able to arrange for a meeting with Senator Ruth Johnson. And the purpose of our meeting is to ask for a $1 million state earmark for next year's budget that would help supplement the federal project that I just referenced from McLean's office. So that's a $4 million project. The estimated cost that Roe put together was $5 million. So we're responsible for 20%. So the strategy is to go in and ask for an earmark that she helps support. And with the connections that we've developed with some friends from another firm, that it just so happens that my new state representative that covers Salem Township grew up with this individual. They're longtime friends, and this individual has been assigned to the Appropriations Committee in the House. So we're going to take it from both angles. Senator Johnson, who last year only had one community in her district ask her for an earmark, and it got approved. So we're going to make sure that we're first in line for a potential earmark for next year's budget and utilize the House connection as well, because it has to go through that process as well. So the goal, I'm sticking my neck out, the goal is that come next Christmas, we'll get another present under the tree for $1 million that will basically fund East and West St. Clair and not cost us a dime. So
Another example of it's who you know, not necessarily what you know, but yeah, that is part of life. Excellent.
Well, you gotta have a little what's the know take advantage of the who you know.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Yeah. Get our Encyclopedia Britannica. Oh, or Google or something. Oh,
That's all I
very
have.
good. Excellent. Thank you. Kim, anything to bring to council?
Sir.
Wayne? Pete?
Great job, David. I've continued digging at grants. I might send my daughter your way for college. One question I do have, and this might be for Brian. So we go on walks around the village quite a bit with our dog, and I've noticed that there's a lot of open cable and telecommunication boxes. Like they're just open, wires hanging out everywhere. Some are around where little kids are running around. You know, I don't think they want kids messing around with live wires. It might be low voltage, but still. There's just a lot of those boxes that seem to be either hit by snow plows, run over by cars, or just the cover is not put on. Do we have a contact that?
I don't know. We have a DTE contact for electricity. Is that what you think they are?
No, I think they're probably cable or old
You can dig something
telephone
up.
boxes that probably nobody uses anymore, but they're just open.
Yeah, we can dig somebody's name up, I think. So can you give me an area real quick so I can go?
There's one on Kidder Road, right where the split rail fence ends, north end. One right next to the First Con Church.
Just enough to get a picture.
Um,
Church Street.
You can see somebody's using that as a place to throw trash. It's starting to fill up.
I'll see what I can do.
That's all I've got.
Keelan, great presentation, thank you. And thanks for everybody that served. And it's nice seeing the different faces of the different boards. So one, nice to see faces, but two, thank you for the time and effort you guys give in your respective boards. It's appreciated.
I was wondering how long the Spark grant, how long before we would hear from that?
Have not announced the second round yet. There were 21 communities, I believe, that received funding in the first round. That was announced sometime in the last 2 weeks. And City of Lapeer received one, as well as Lapeer County locally. But they have not announced when the second round will be. They're suspecting it'll be May. So that's when we'll submit our application.
Okay. And how are we doing with the acquiring the parcel of land on Van Dyke? Where are we at with that?
Contract has been sent to the Sherwoods, and we're waiting for Uncle Sam to get it to them. And hopefully we'll have an update at our next meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jackie? All set? I feel the necessity of airing out a bit on the sale of the movie theater building and the medical building that our managers brought to our attention on several occasions. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you have brought it to the council's attention on several occasions because you view it as a potential overall benefit for the village. And when that's come up, I have made comments that addressed the manner in which that transaction, if it proceeds, may affect me in my practice. It's hard not to think about it since it's somewhat existential in terms of me and my family and my clients. However, as a council member and as president of the village, I have to state that in thinking it through further, it would be more than likely for the overall benefit of the village if that transaction went forth. Maybe tough luck for me, but it would be a positive thing for the village, the potential to develop the east side of Main Street. a lot of good things that happen on the west side of Van Dyke, in large part thanks to the Yarboroughs. And it would benefit the village if there was a development on the east side, which is why I was enthused when those two buildings were purchased some years ago by a particular Elmont businessman. Because the two buildings were going to be built up and they were going to really insert into the business community on that side of town. So I just wanted to indicate that that would be a benefit to the village, and I just have to deal with my own issues. But thank you for keeping us informed on that. I just needed to indicate that it's my obligation to support what's for the benefit of the village. And we're adjourned.